Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a year since I've owned the Canon RF 200 to 800mm lens, and I thought it was worth doing a little review of how I've been getting along. It's safe to say it's still the best lens in the, let me say, the amateur market. If you don't want to spend 5, 10, 15,000 pounds, this is the best way to go. And I've said to a couple of people, if for whatever fantasy magic reason somebody gave me a prime and this 600mm, 500mm, an 800mm prime, I won the lotto, whatever, I'd sell it and probably buy a full frame camera to go along with this R7, which is my one and only camera. I only use one of each. I walk around with this. I know the settings. There's no confusion about what I need to do to take a picture. I've got all my custom functions set in and I'm away. Yeah, ideally, I think if I could have access to another piece of kit, would be the camera as opposed to a lens. So I picked it up in Hong Kong at a very good price at the time, back in, I think it was March into 2024. Now you can get it for about that price here, which was, I paid about £1,700, English pounds, and were the equivalent anyway. And it came with this camouflage cover, which a lot of people have been asking me where I got it. And it just came with a lens. It was in Hong Kong. I think he charged me 20 quid extra, 20 pounds extra. And a lot of people have been asking me about the lens, do I recommend it? And people have bought it just from my videos. I did a review last year after about a month of having it, and it's my most watched video, 12,000, nothing special, but that's a decent number. I saw people were doing reviews of cameras and lenses and they were getting good numbers, and I thought I'll do that as well. And it's pretty decent. Now for an update, would I keep using it? Yes, I am. Unless they bring out the Canon R7 Mark II or some Mark II version of this lens, then I'm going to stick with it. Because I like the zoom range, the 200 to 800. I was just working in the 400 to 600 range. I do occasionally have to zoom back. If I'm in a prime, it's no good for me. I don't like it. There are lots of times, I was at a reserve a couple of weeks ago where I was at the bird feeders, and I needed to zoom back, or else I just wouldn't have been able to get the birds in the frame because the birds were only about 8 feet away. And I've said it before, 800mm trumps all other primes at 500, 600. It doesn't matter if you crop, you will simply not get as good a quality with 800mm. And on a cropped body, cropped sensor, like the R7, which is, I believe, I'm pretty sure I've checked it out, is the only APS-C sensor in the Canon mirrorless range. With a 4K crop mode, you get the standard 1.6 times crop factor of the APS-C sensor. And on top of that, when you go 4K crop mode in video, you get an additional 1.8 times because you're only using part of the sensor. You don't need all of the sensor when filming in 4K, because when you take stills with this camera, it produces 32.5 megapixel images. You only need 4K, which is 8 megapixel images. Now, I don't have access to any other lenses, any other bodies, so it's difficult for me to say, well, compared to this lens and compared to that camera, if I put it on this camera, it does this, performs this way. I can't do it. I've only got this, so I can only compare with what I see online. Now, what I see a lot of on social media is people with very obviously better equipment than I have. And some people even say what it is. And I look at it and think, you really don't know how to use that camera or lens. And you don't know how to set it up, or you don't know how to frame. You literally just point the camera and press the button. I saw somebody recently do that. I've just upgraded my camera and lens, and these are the results. And I looked at it and thought, that's pretty much the same thing you were getting last time. I think a lot of people are in some sort of weird mindset that the camera is going to do the work for them. No. Anyone that knows a little bit about photography could probably pick up the cheapest DSLR, the cheapest lens, and outperform people with a £5,000 camera and a £15,000 lens. You've really got to learn how to use your equipment. Now, some die-hard equipment fanatics might say, oh, I just don't think it's as good a quality. Fine. If you've got the money to spend on super expensive equipment, then go for it. But most of us, 99.5% of us, aren't having our images bought by the National Geographic or being used on BBC Springwatch. Yes, if you have a prime lens and a top range camera, if you're both pointing at the same subject from the right distance, the prime in the better camera, say a full frame sensor, will be obviously better to most people. Some people might not be able to see it still. Depends on how well their eyes are trained to photography. But most people will just think, no, that's both a good photo. I mean, you know, some people might not like the shallow depth of field of a prime lens. Personally, I'm not a massive fan of it. Sometimes it looks too, I don't know, the depth of field is so shallow that it actually looks like an AI image. I'll just throw over some of my favorite images taken with this lens and camera for you to see what it's capable of if used correctly. And then what I'll do is I'll talk about the downsides. Now, I have made a video about the image stabilizer. I think it doesn't happen as much when it's zoomed all the way back. But when you're further out, if you try to lean up against anything, lean your arm, your body, anything to sort of stabilize the camera while you're filming, there happens to be some sort of overcorrection by the system and it starts to really shake. And the only way to sort of get around this is you've got to go fully handheld and you've got to be moving it to some extent. The camera needs to feel movement to correct itself. Otherwise, you've got to put it on a tripod and have no wind whatsoever. And then it doesn't happen. The tiniest bit of wind can set it off. So it needs to be 100% stationary or moving a little bit. So the image stabilizer has something to work against. I don't know if there's ever going to be a correction with an algorithm with that, but that's a really big annoyance. I've had to work around it. I've had to sort of, the other day I found a little half workaround when I was using the 4K crop mode where I was filming something at the 4K crop at 800 millimeters and I was very lightly shaking the camera body, just enough to produce some in-body shake. And the camera, I could see it was correcting for it. Now it would have been terrible. There was still a little bit of movement there, but it would have been a whole lot worse if I didn't do that. Another slight little workaround is filming everything at 60 frames per second, and then I can slow it down 50%, and that doubles the length of that particular clip. I'll take some audio from somewhere and overlay it, because if you slow down the clip 50%, it also slows down the audio, which you don't want. And the other big issue is it only has one stabilizer setting on or off. And when it's on, it corrects for everything, vertical and horizontal. Now, normally, if you were tracking a subject, whether it be a bird or a sports car, you turn off the horizontal stabilization and only keep on the vertical so you can pan smoothly. This doesn't have that. It works in all the axes. So when you try to pan and follow a bird circling in the sky, it just fights you. It kind of judders. You film one way and then you sort of jumps and goes back a little bit. Or I get the bird at one end of the frame and let it naturally move in to the frame. So I have to zoom out a little bit to get it in and allow the bird to fly around within the frame rather than me zooming in and following it. So again, lots of workarounds to use this lens, but there's no perfect lens, there's no perfect camera. Every one you have to kind of work within the limits, the problems, the design features. I mean, even right now, the eyepiece on this Canon R7 is awful. It's coming to bits. Every time I put it in a bag to travel, it does a bit of damage to it. Whereas the old cameras, you could just slide the whole thing off and replace it. This is actually a separate bit of rubber. Horrible design. There's no way of sort of protecting it from putting it into any kind of bag. I had to add a manual focus ring because trying to get to it when you're looking through the lens and finding it, especially with a camera cover on, is nigh on impossible, especially to get a good grip. This way I can feel it immediately. A great workaround I found several months ago to not being able to turn off the autofocus. Now, in the previous lens, I had the Sigma 150 to 600 mil. You could manual focus override just by turning the manual focus ring, just to get the eye tracking onto the bird, and then the lens would take over if you had to get through some branches. This doesn't allow, well, it does. There is a button there, but it's flat and it's hard to find. And it's to get your finger onto it is a real problem. You just want to be able to do the ring. You need kind of 3 hands to be able to press that button, turn the dial, and use the camera buttons. So what you do is you can actually go into the menu and assign another button to autofocus off. I don't know if anybody else has got a different way of doing it, but yeah, I press that button and it turns the autofocus off. So when I turn the ring here, the manual focusing ring, it's just enough to get it on the bird's eye. The tracking takes over. I take my finger off the autofocus and it usually holds focus on the eye. If there's a lot of distraction, I have to keep my finger on the autofocus off and try and use the manual focus guide to keep the bird in focus while I film it. Fiddly, but it's saved a lot of footage. Overall, extremely happy for it. 800mm for that price. And unless they bring out another camera and another lens, I'll be sticking with this for the near future. Hoping that all of this gets back to Canon somehow. I'm not saying for me, I'm not that big-headed. And they do something with the algorithm. They can do some software and send it straight to the camera and fix the problems I've spoken about. I don't see why it isn't a software problem. Lots of people have been buying it through my videos. I need to hit Canon up to sort me out some readies for all the business I've sent their way. Anybody has any questions? Because yeah, like I said, I've probably had 20 or 30 people who have gone and bought at least either the R7 or the 200 to 800 or both, literally by watching my videos. A lot of pressure because I don't want to have people spend that kind of money and it not work for them. Nobody's complained so far. The things I've spoken about which have been a problem, I've mentioned it well before they bought it. So when they did buy it and they spoke to me, they said, yeah, I've got that problem too. It is annoying, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah, if you hear anything about fixing it, let me know too. Okay, I think that covers everything. I did this unscripted. I just went out for a walk. It was a bit quiet in my local area patch. And this was on my list of to-dos a year in. Done it now. I think I've covered everything. You may have seen some nice pictures I've taken with it. It is an exceptionally good lens. I'd rate it like an 8 out of 10. Again, but there's nothing to compare it to. So one last thing, maybe just the Canon F11, it's restricted to that aperture, 800mm prime. I simply wouldn't buy it because you can't, I need to zoom. I absolutely have to zoom because there are many times I've needed to bring the zoom in to get birds in shot. And also if a bird takes off, you want to be zoomed back to get it in frame before you zoom into the bird. And that way a primed would not work for me. Okay, sorry, I think that's definitely it. Okay.